What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so happy to be here with this next guest. Her story is inspirational to me, as it should be to many of you. So without further ado, Samaire Armstrong, thank you so much for being on my channel.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Same here. If you could just give us a little context as to who you are, why you're here, what your journey has
Sure.
been.
Yeah, so I am an actress. I've been in the industry for 20 years or so. Moved out to Hollywood when I was 18, and for the last 20 years, I've sort of bit my tongue at everything I saw that was going on. I've been in a lot of film and television, and in the midst of sort of this liberal agenda. And it wasn't until now where I could really see the forest for the trees as to what was going on in terms of my industry, and its participation in the radical left movement
Right.
being pushed to destroy our constitution and our culture and American society as we've grown in it. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's
so
interesting to give some context to maybe those that are on my channel, because I'm a conservative Christian channel, so they might not know who you are. They might not have seen,
yeah.
some of your
So
work.
one of my bigger shows that people are familiar with is the OC.
The
I was
OC.
Anna on the OC. I was also Emily in Entourage. I had a stint on The Mentalist and
Okay.
have done a fair amount of films. So that's sort of like the world I existed in, network television and film.
I love that.
Uh,
So
yeah.
one of your I guess big stepping stones in this whole, I guess, political conversation, you posted on Instagram, right? That was probably the big pop that you saw a lot of traction from the first time you got some pushback for kind of voicing your own
Yes.
opinions.
Yeah, so actually, so what happened was, obviously in the COVID lockdown, a lot of us had a lot of time to ourselves to research things. I jumped on the BLM bandwagon
Hmm.
because I was, fighting for the injustice of what was going on as we were being told that it was occurring. And I realized it dawned on me after some manic few days of signing petitions and, going out and demonstrating and um, it was a moment where I had been sent a petition to release a criminal from jail
Hmm.
whose case I didn't even look into before I signed my name, and I was like, "Holy, my goodness! It's time to take a step back and analyze what's going on because I've only been listening to other people tell me what to do versus being cognitive and being like why are we all doing this right now
So
and
there's a funny question I want to ask, because I feel like there's a consistent thread throughout your story and a lot of people that I know that have kind of decided to walk away. And that's, what news were you watching at the time?
I wasn't watching news.
So that's usually the
Yeah, yeah.
general consensus, right?
Yes, 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 yes. I mean, I would say, if anything, I was very familiar with the idea that CNN and NBC, and, on the though anything outside of Fox is driven to create and establish a narrative that
Mhm.
people subscribe to. Fox has its own narrative. I've watched Tucker Carlson. I've watched a few episodes of things. I don't like the feeling of watching news, so I was never sort of one to sit in front of it and just ingest it.
Right.
Even my 7-year-old says in this house, it's like, the news is meant to make you fearful. So
Mm.
I've found I gathered my pieces of information mostly through sort of seeds of um, hints through social media, right? So you'll see something flare up in protest over one thing, and they'll be like, "Why is that happening?" Go look it up. And of course, reading things off of Fox News is definitely an aspect of it to get the whole picture, but that's well within the research on going through all the sources to put together and compile a perspective that you feel confident in.
Absolutely. I do think that it's interesting that you bring up BLM at first, because the George Floyd event, And those immediate, maybe 3 months after that, were really crucial in a lot of people's decision to kind of start speaking out politically, whether it be for the left or the right. I do think it's interesting that you said, when you were asked to sign petitions and you were asked to donate money, that was kind of a turning point for you, because now you're looking at what's underneath the
Exactly.
slogans.
I would say there was about 3 days where I was just like, do this, do that, do this. And I remember hitting a wall and saying, oh my God, I can't, this feeling within me is, I have so much anxiety right now. I don't even know what's going on. I've been like being a follower of this mania. And I talked to a friend who's from Venezuela. He lives there currently. And he said, his name is Carlos Flores. He's an investigative journalist.
Oh, wow.
He informed me the ties between BLM and Nicolas Maduro.
Wow.
And, so it took me a little bit to sit on that and be like, nah, that's just a coincidence, and then to dive deeper into that, understanding why possibly, there's open letters that Opal Tomadi has written in support of this dictator, of a terrorist and drug trafficking regime. Why, and then being revealed that they're Marxists. Okay, what's a Marxist? Oh, communism.
Right.
Dictator connection. What,
I do feel like a lot of people look at that as soon as you start saying Marxism and communism. People who tend to be neutral or don't pay attention to these things tend to dismiss it and be like, okay, now it's conspiracy theory. But what is it about those things that are actual fact, and how do they line up right now?
Cognitive dissidence, right? COVID happened. And the first time we were told to stay home for the week, when you went outside, wasn't it sort of a weird moment where you're like, everything looks normal, but in my head, I'm supposed to be afraid of everyone out here. So it's the same thing. The idea of communism and socialism even is so abstract to us that we completely dismiss it, unless it's in mainstream media, which it will never be, because they're not going to broadcast their plan. We are being pushed and led by communist China, communist Venezuela, Marxist ideology to corrupt our country and our constitution. This is happening. They want to dismantle our freedom of speech, our rights to our Second Amendment, our rights to religious freedom, and it's all under the disguise of virtue signaling. Well, you don't care. You don't care. You're being too sensitive. You're being a xenophobe, or not a xenophobe, but what were they saying that Trump was being when he initially wanted to lock down the country?
Oh yeah, xenophobic for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And so if you speak up on it, it's this interesting system of, it's like a catch-22. You can't speak up on it, because if speaking up on it means that you are it, and that's BS. And what happened was, when I started to unveil this, and within my understanding, and realize that the being aware of it and advocating for it immediately makes me a bad person.
There's target, essentially.
There, right?
Yeah.
There's missing logic, which we know has been happening for a very long time now. There's no logic. We've been playing into this radical left ideology of, 57 genders, or all whites are racists, or, all this BS. And the right, for the most part, has kept silent, because it's like, okay, those people are, you know what I mean? Like, let them do their thing. But now our rights are being taken away. And we've played into these people like needing safe spaces, or, throwing their arms up over the idea of Ben Shapiro coming and speaking with them because he's what a Nazi? Or did they say that?
Yeah, the Jewish Nazi, Ben Shapiro.
Right. The logic is gone. But this is intentional. This is a plotted plan. I couldn't say by who, but I do believe that China is involved. And I do believe that, other communist regimes are involved. And I get it. This is abstract. It sounds crazy. And if you can look in the moment to identify, does your audience not believe, or do you think most people on your side, in your viewership, are understanding what's happening?
So
I have a 7-year-old.
Oh.
He's literally climbing the wall right now. Literally
That's what
right
I would be
here.
doing if I was seven
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so my audience is of either two persuasions. I have very QAnon kind of people who,
Right.
I'm not necessarily a QAnon believer, but fine, do
But
your thing.
yeah.
And then I have people who are very Christian, very religious. They've been in church
Right.
for a long time, so they're voting based on the biblical ideas.
Right.
So
Okay.
those are kind of the two main streams of people that are watching this. I do think it's super interesting that you bring up the idea of China and foreign money because those things are so influential in our economy and
Yes.
dictates a lot of where our attention goes. Especially, I could imagine you being in Hollywood. I could imagine that plays some sort of role there as far as what gets prioritized and what doesn't. Have you seen anything like that as far as like Chinese
Well,
influence?
yeah, yes. I mean, even, Mulan just came out.
Yes.
The Disney thanked China for it. A lot of films are funded by Chinese money. You saw The Rock speak with Kamala and Biden.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason these people are in bed, so to speak, with Kamala and Biden, and it's because Kamala and Biden for sure, is in bed with China.
So do you
And
think that these social issues like gender fluidity and all these things are kind of just being given to the people as in saying
that's
like, okay,
there's a
fine, we'll give
tax
you this, just support
it's
us.
tactual.
Yes.
It's literally tactual. Hold on, show you the handbook. It's literally in the handbook. This is a
Wow.
tactic used and written to divide the culture and separate them, cause a distraction, distract us by color, by sexual preference and orientation, victimize one group and make the other one the enemy.
Right.
We
Cultural
see it.
Marxism.
Exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. This is written out. This is a already has been planned, and by planned I mean a well established pattern. When Opal Tomati or the other one of the other three founders, I can't remember which one said it, if it was Patricia, they said, we are trained Marxists. We're trained in organizing. That's what this is.
Yes.
But for the average person, hearing that, you're a decent human being. You can't possibly, have the bandwidth or the scope to understand that people could be so far off from the values one
Or
self exists in.
so calculated, I think is a great way to put it, because these are people that have calculated out to the furthest extent of our culture and civilization
Yes.
how we should be organized and
Yes.
structured as a society.
Right. Right. And the difference between communism and capitalism is a natural progression of trade and barter.
Right.
Communism is a construct of Karl Marx, who thought, hey, I'm going to equally distribute this wealth
Hmm.
and make sure that everyone's taken care of. That means that there are people in charge of your existence.
It's so
That's
funny. I was just talking about that this morning. This idea of communism or Marxism, it creates two classes. But then, if you agree with equal distribution, then
yes,
the minute that you say to yourself, "I want to do better for myself," now you've
yes,
left that worldview, and you
right,
get put on the chopping block for wanting to
yes,
progress and do
yes,
better. And now you've
yes,
become a capitalist in a Marxist society, and you
yes.
get a target put on your back.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm not sure what it's going to take for people to see this. It's a personal evolution of sorts that sort of creates that awakening, because thinking outside of what you know to be real is hard. And it's hard to accept a shift in reality. I mean, we all went through it with COVID at the beginning of it. The process of letting our brains understand that life as we knew it is no longer. And to imagine to have to go through that again with what is going on now can be challenging. But the proof for me is in our streets on fire, right?
Right.
The actual destruction of our cities at the hands of anti fascists and BLM, who are calling for the defunding of our police, which actually leaves more people vulnerable, the ones that they're saying, right? We need to protect vulnerable communities. They're talking about Black communities in economically challenged situations. They are the ones who are being done a disservice to by defunding the police.
Yeah,
Crime has
and that's
gone up,
even
homicide has
backed up by
gone up.
statistics. Absolutely.
Yep.
Most people in the inner city, they've done a poll, and most black people who live in the inner city would prefer to have more police instead of less.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And the thing that I find so interesting and very sad, we're talking about the conversation of systemic racism, systemic injustice, economic injustice, and we're at the point where we're supposed to make a decision of who's going to be at the helm of our country leading us again. Well, when that conversation goes hand in hand with who's to be president, why aren't we able to look at the history of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as both politicians, attorney generals, and prosecutors? Why wouldn't we take that into accountability? So we're talking literally about systemic injustice. I mean, Joe Biden was the one who, as it was called, the Biden crime law. This is just
Right.
one piece of systemic injustice. And I told you I was on Ice Cube's thread, like, you know, um, where he came out wishy-washy about who he was voting for, but
Hmm.
he did say that the Democratic Party said, "Hey, yeah, we'd love to talk to you. Let's talk after you vote for us."
Right.
And the Republican Party was like, "Hey, come and talk, and let's figure out what we can do to how to make this platinum plan even better."
Hmm.
And so I wrote on, I wrote on the post, and I've been like days deep in conversation with people now. We want to have this we're having this is BLM's movement of what we've all watched of systemic injustice. And I say systemic injustice because I think honestly it has a lot more to do with economic injustice than just
Agreed.
race, you
Agreed.
know? And so, here we are having these conversations about it, but we're supposed to omit actual facts.
Right. Right. Yeah. I tend to think so. I grew up in Paterson, New
It's
Jersey, which is in the relative
racism.
area of probably one of the biggest inner cities in New Jersey. What I've kind of come to the conclusion of is systemic injustice isn't necessarily as big as cultural relevance is for people in the inner city. So a lot of what's happening to people in the inner city is passed down knowledge
Hmm.
of things
Hmm.
that are necessarily not healthy in order
Right,
to get into
right.
the middle class. So
Yeah,
I think in
yeah,
order for us to make any influence in those areas, we have to be able to engage the culture with proper ideas and
yes,
non-toxic
yes,
ideas.
yes. And it's so interesting how resistant people are to new ideas and culture. And the thought that as a white woman, I had the audacity to come in and have a conversation is shocking to a lot of people. And
Hmm.
I'm trying to look at things like, look, I want to be respectful, and I went hard for BLM. I was out there post. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that I care, right? And that doesn't matter. Nobody needs to believe that or not. I
Right.
know where my heart is. But if we can't have a conversation as Americans rather than a white person and a black person,
Right.
we're never going to get to a place of unity.
Right.
And there's this.
One of the things that I think is I find it fascinating about the left is that they will say you don't care when they're
Yeah.
arguing for a solution. So I
Right,
think
right.
we've gone from a place to saying, all right, we both care about this, we have different ways to go about it, to now there's this place where it's like, if you don't agree with me, you don't care. So
Yes.
one thing that I like to make sure I do on
Beautiful.
almost all of my statuses, I'm like, you can tell me I'm wrong, but you
Yes.
can't tell me I don't care.
Yes. I like that. I'm going to use that.
Use
Thank
it,
you.
please, for sure.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's just really sad. So I guess my point more than anything is vote for whoever you want, but please just be open to the idea that there are other pieces of information out there. And it's hard to get to because the way that Google searches are. It's like if you phrase your sentence, your question in a certain way, you're going to get an answer that reflects it. So
Yep.
and not that DuckDuckGo is much better, but I do push for suggesting using DuckDuckGo,
Hmm.
using a sentence that is as least biased as possible, right? And also citing your sources of who you're going to get the information.
Right.
And so if you're going to get it from a left-leaning publication, you're going to get a left-leaning perspective. The interesting thing is for Kamala, which is actually a really good way to debunk her, is there was a time where she was running as a presidential candidate.
Right.
So people from the left were actually writing honest things about her, right? And her reflecting because they didn't want her to win, right?
Right.
So they're like, hey, this one might not be the one for us. But then, of
Absolutely.
course, as soon as she became vice president, that like the
She's a
narrative
hero.
totally
You know,
shifted. You
she's
see that with
a
Sean
black
King,
American hero. Yeah.
right? Right? Sean King was like, Kamala Harris is the worst thing that's happened to the black community or something or another. I'm totally not saying that correctly. But then she gets nominated and he says, my work here is done. A black woman has been, put up for vice president. We've made it, and the logic is gone. And it's challenging because at this point, I've had a number of friends who, you know, I always was okay disagreeing with. I never said anything. I let
Hmm.
them have their ideas. But now that I've brought up my idea, I'm not allowed, I'm not, yeah, forget it, forget it. So to me at this point, it's not just about left and right. To me, it's about thinking and not thinking,
Yes.
right? Because I can really respect a Democrat who's like, hey, let's have a conversation about it. Do you know how often that happens?
Very rarely.
Very rarely.
Yes, absolutely. And usually it devolves. Maybe they'll start very, appreciative of the conversation,
Yes,
and then it
yes,
eventually devolves into name calling, and that's when
yeah.
I kind of stop it. For a long time, there was people that would engage me on every single thing that I posted until I told them, hey, I'm willing to talk this out over the phone or even do like an IG live and talk to you about it, and they stopped commenting altogether because it's hard to
Yeah.
hold those positions without it crumbling on itself.
Right, 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 right. And I think it's so important to remain open, like I believe you said, to
Hmm.
being wrong.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and
I'd rather be wrong, but you can't tell me I don't care.
right,
Yeah.
right. And in that, it leaves opportunity and space for, I like to say, for God, because that those are the moments where two people of contrasting perspectives can come together and feel a piece of unity in collaborating on finding truth and uncovering things that one other person might not have known yet. And that's a vital element and also a missing element in what's going on in our culture right now because we're not having these conversations.
Right.
You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Yeah, I think compassion has been replaced with acceptance, where instead of just feeling compassion for another person who has a different view or a worldview than you have to not only be compassionate towards them, but accept them wholeheartedly as fact, whatever it is that they believe. And that goes down a very slippery slope until we
It
devolve
does.
into, like Jordan Peterson has talked about postmodern thought,
Oh, yes,
where
yes.
nothing is real, nothing is up, nothing is down.
Right,
It's just whatever you
right.
suggest. So
Yes,
reality is a suggestion.
absolutely. Absolutely. I wonder that all the time, contemplating like, well, my perspective is so clear to me. Their perspective is so clear to them. They've got their news sources and their facts and their research. Like, what is real anymore?
Right.
And for me, I try to go back to reality's perceptive, right? So what we think we see,
Right.
and that's just like the Google search. What slanted question we put in it will be the outcome of what information is given to us. But there are fundamental truths that America exists in. And those are our values, which are Judeo Christian values that we
Yes.
all share, right? As American citizens,
Absolutely.
we don't have to be Christian. I am not religious, but I share those values,
Right.
and then also our American rights and freedoms. And if you can fight and stand up for that, the rest of it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. I was talking with somebody earlier about that same thing, the idea that we're founded on Judeo Christian values. Doesn't mean this is a Christian country and that everybody
Yep.
has to be
Yep.
Christian, but because of those things, we have a government that not only allows us, but encourages us to respond to somebody else before we respond to the government or obey the government. So we obey God before we obey government, and
Mm,
that's written into our fundamental laws. And
mm,
that is what really makes America very, very unique because we're
yeah.
the only bastion of freedom left where we say, hey, our allegiance is not to our government first and foremost, our
Yes.
allegiance is to our
Oh,
God.
I have chills right now. And then you think about them taking the Pledge of Allegiance out, not saying God. And
Right.
why are they trying to separate? Gosh, I know why, but the question remains, why are they trying to separate us from our internal
Hmm.
guide, that which is God,
Right. Well,
right? They're
because it
they're
removes
trying
objectivity.
exactly. And
Absolutely.
intuition and gut feelings and connectivity to something beyond them. These are really important conversations that are hard for people even to want to look at.
Yeah, and then that's why I tell my even my atheist friends, I'm like, you should be embracing the Judeo-Christian ethic or value system, just because we don't want to live in a society that goes day by day on what is acceptable and what is not. Because if you were to take us right now, transport us back 500 years or something, when it was legal to own slaves, legal to do this, legal to do that,
Right,
we would
right,
have that perspective and say, hey, this
right,
is just society
right,
accepts it, so
right, right,
obviously it's
right.
good. When you place
Yeah.
your values on something beyond the government, beyond culture and society,
Mhm.
now you
Mhm.
have something stagnant and something objective to live on.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
have to ask, just because I'd be remiss if I didn't, uh, doing what you do for a living and being somebody that's in this business, I'm sure you've been asked this many times. What kind of effect has this had on your career? Has it had an effect at all, or are people bringing
Yeah.
it up to you?
Yeah. Or have people what?
Have people brought it up to you, like during work?
I think for a while now, I've sort of been in some ways on the fringe of Hollywood,
Mm,
in that I never wanted to or was able to stomach the path that it takes to get to, sort of like the elite Hollywood. And this includes, like, publicity and dating the right person and
right.
saying the right thing and showing up to the right party. I literally reject all of that. It makes me so uncomfortable.
Wow.
And it, and the truth is, for me, that was the real acting part, was having to, be within that structure. The easy acting part was saying lines. The hard acting part was being a part of that. And I had my own issues within that, that caused me to sort of step away with that and really gain confidence that I am who I am, regardless of this industry, and capable of creating what I want without them. So it's been at least a decade now that the narrative has been so strongly pushed. Narrative literally meaning the plots of scripts and storytelling, to the left, that you know I to engage in a cultural evolution, of continued evolution of what's right, that good stuff, that good character quality person, the struggles that they go through, the mistakes they made to get to an awakening, all these wonderful moments that reflect humanity, American humanity even. And that has been disintegrating. It doesn't exist. It's literally narrative and propaganda. So it was easy for me at this point, especially after years have coming to this conclusion, that this is not what I want. This is not what I signed up for. This literally makes me nauseous while doing it. That I was okay with being like, no, that's not the way.
Hmm.
And the interesting part is, I actually let go of my agents and manager a year ago, because I still have a lawyer, but my representation, because I wasn't buying it. These
Wow.
people, they tell you, like, oh, you're too this, you're too that, but the too this and too that was, you're too old and you're too white. Everything's diverse right now.
Wow.
No one's getting work. And I just kept thinking, like, you have to think outside of the box. Like, I see white people on television. This is possible. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I can work. And the funny thing was, I was still getting offers. I was doing 2 to 4 movies a year, straight offers. But then these people would take my cuts, their
Oh.
10%, and tell me that I couldn't get work. That's weird. I'm working. You know what I
Wow.
mean?
Yeah.
So it was like, I don't need you. So I let go of them last year. And I having gone through life experience, knowing that I'm capable of providing for my family in other means and ways outside of just showing up to Hollywood, I was very confident to sort of be like, F you, so to speak.
Hmm.
And since then, I've had previous agents reach out to me thanking me for standing up and speaking out. I've also gotten, in one week, I got like 7 offers on projects from people who are also sick of the industry. And
I would imagine there's some sort of silent majority or minority within
yeah,
Hollywood that's
yeah,
tired of all the politics, tired
yeah,
of all the left leaning stuff.
yes.
I would
But
imagine.
Yeah, and if you think about the silent majority, which is major, they want content. You know what I mean? And there are people like me who want to make that content. And now it's just a matter of doing it. So yeah, I do have actually a project in the works that I'm really excited about that just came because I spoke out, and that producer also happened to be really sick of how things were, and it was a concept that jived with me, and I'm excited to be a part of the producing process rather than just be an actress who shows up between action and cut. But I'm right now, my main joy is this fight for America. You know, there's never been anything more fulfilling than being a patriot. Honestly, you know, there
Absolutely.
to stand up for a country that's fought so hard for our freedoms that now people are willfully giving away to morons. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
I'm not okay with that.
So to I guess bring this to a slow and steady close, if there was somebody that's maybe listening to this that's been following your content and they are in your industry, what advice do you have for somebody that has a big profile, that has all these people kind of
Yeah.
looking towards them? What helpful advice can you give them
I
to?
I think that the Constitution is a nonpartisan issue, right? So being an American doesn't have to be about being left or right. Being having values doesn't have to be about being left or right. And to speak on those truths can separate you from, look, I'm full on vote Trump for me, you know what I mean? But I
Me
think for
too.
people who are a little bit, well, what happened was when I decided to speak out, the first thing I said was, "Hey guys, it's okay to be pro America." And I actually got feedback that was like, "No, it's not."
Mhm.
From a white dude who lives in West Hollywood, you know what I mean, who is in the music industry. Why is it not okay to be proud of America? So that like triggered me. I was like, oh hell no. Oh,
Right.
excuse me. You know what I mean? There's no way. Don't even. That's not no. It's okay to be proud of America. It's okay to be uh proud of the country that gives so many people freedom that they actually leave their country to come here. You should be proud of that. You should fight for that. And that's not about Biden or Trump.
Right.
That's about America. And I think, not to bring it back to Trump, but I think that's why people resonate with him because that's what he's speaking on.
Absolutely. He's unapologetically trying to make this country, the country that we all call home, a better
Yes.
place. And people find that
Yes.
to be triggering for some reason.
Triggering. So triggered.
I
So
almost went a
triggered.
whole podcast without saying the word triggered.
Oh, darn it.
But I do appreciate your views. I think you're a huge encouragement to a lot of people that may be in a similar situation to you, and a lot of people who are just admiring. But I would like to extend the ability for you to plug anything that you'd like, your YouTube, your Instagram, whatever it is that you're working on. Is there anything that we can expect in the near future that we should be
Yeah, so
excited for?
what I've been doing is I've been interviewing people who traditionally the left has implied doesn't belong in the conservative world, and hearing their perspective and thought process on how they came to an evolution of being pro America, pro Trump. I have that on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
I also, yeah, my Instagram, I've been going pretty hard on revealing some things to the public that perhaps the media won't put out. And continuing to have in conversations and engaging with Americans. One of my favorite thing is DMing with people who are following me and asking questions and sharing insights and sources and facts. I think that's what's going to keep this all going and take us home through November 3rd.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm urging everybody watching to make sure you follow and continue to just take this journey with you. And thank you so much for being on. I can't tell you how grateful I
Oh,
am to have you on
it's
here.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Great. Stick around. I'm gonna stop recording.
Okay.
Have a good one.